publications that are available for those types of organizations, what similar organizations are doing, if it's been found, for example, the Department of Education has published a study perhaps on peer-to-peer, student-to-student abuse, and they have recommendations. So any of those would be reference points for the particular type of organization.
Can I just understand something? Your CV includes a list of the organisations which you refer to as specific client organisations.
Yes.
Now, just taking the religious organisations, I haven't counted them up. There's a lot of them.
There's a lot. I've worked a great deal with religious organizations.
Are you telling us that you've gone in and done separate work with each of these separate religious organisations?
Yes.
True. How many are there?
Well, one of the reasons that there's so many is that in the United States, when the Catholic Church developed programs for dioceses under the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People, the Conference of Major Superiors of Men also developed a program, and I oversaw the implementation of that program. And during that time, worked with many, many individual religious orders and congregations of men.
So when you say you oversaw the program, a program was developed, and then you participated in its implementation. Is that what you're saying?
I worked with them to develop the program of accreditation.
So
and
who did you work with for that?
The Conference of Major Superiors of Men.
So that's an overarching body.
It is, and we had a specific advisory body of individual leaders from within that to develop standards. And then I went to regional meetings with the leadership of those orders and congregations.
So you've been to meetings with each of these organisations?
The ones that I have listed are the ones that I've actually been to, either went to where they live to do an accreditation audit, or I went and did an educational program with them, or I did a risk assessment with them, or developed policies with them. So each one of those would be an individual meeting at most of the time the place where they function.
Individual meeting or a series of meetings? Or what?
Sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months.
You must have been very busy.
You can see why I decided I was traveling too much and had to make some changes.
Well, what about all of the other organisations? Are you saying to us that you've been one-on-one with each of the other organisations as well?
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes, sir, I am.
To do what?
It depends. Sometimes a risk assessment, sometimes an educational program, sometimes policy development.
Do you have assistants?
Much of this work took place before 2007. I still do a great deal of work now. I had a team when I was working with Presidium.
You had a team of people working with you?
Yes.
So when was that? That was up until?
Up until 2007.
So can we assume that all of the work that's been done up until 2007 has been done by you with others, is that right?
Up until 2007?
Sure.
Yes.
And that, when I look at these organisations, seems to be all of it, is that right?
Up to 2007? No.
Which ones are after 2007?
Are we looking at religious, or are we looking at just throughout?
Well, I'm looking at organisations under the heading specific client organisations, but then trying to relate that back. But have I missed something?
Perhaps to help you, Dr. Applewhite, would it be those that are listed from the middle of page 2 through to the foot of page 3, that page and a half?
Sure.
In the post-2007 period.
Yes.
was just trying to relate any of, so you've identified particular organisations, September 2007, and then research you've also identified, and then we go, I think, to everything that's been done before 2007, and then I was trying to relate that back to the particular organisations you mentioned. My guess was that they were all before 2007.
So I can, the work that I've done since 2007 has focused on independent schools, private schools. So they would be, if you look under schools, Buckingham Brown and Nichols School.
So that's on
Hackley
page 11.
School.
You're looking at page 11.
Yes.
Yes.
Hackley School, Marlowe School for Girls, Milton Hershey School.
So the schools might be after 2007.
Yes. And then I've also focused on a couple of international projects that in the Catholic Church, the Missionaries of the Sacred Heart, Holy Cross Fathers and Brothers, and the Montfort Missionaries.
What have you done for them?
I've worked with those to develop standards that could be applied to their organization, so that would be congregations of men that would have men in anywhere from 20 to 40 countries. And so I've worked with them to develop standards that could be applied to their organization throughout the world.
What do you mean standards?
Standards, so for example, that just a standard that I would use as an example would be that anyone who's ever had a sexual offense against a minor would never be in public ministry again. And that would be a standard that I would work with them to educate people about, to try to make sure that each part of the world where they're working would uphold that standard. So we would develop the standards and then do education about it and work with them to figure out what the policy differences might be, because the law is so different in so many different places, and then go to those countries if we need to and make sure that they're being implemented.
Dr. Applewhite, if you go back to page 2 of your CV, you had identified the Milton Hershey School, that's the second, as it were, sub-bullet point,
Yes.
as being work that you did, which included the identification of their standard of care and advising on best practice. Do you recall when was that, Milton Hershey School?
I've worked with Milton Hershey School off and on since 2007. So when I did that actual risk assessment, I did a risk assessment and then I did a review later to see if they'd implemented the recommendations. So probably I did the review maybe a year ago, and the original risk assessment maybe 2 years ago.
All right, and then
It could have been a little longer, but about that.
And then which of these others here involve the identification of their standards and advice on best practice?
I don't see any more that specifically had that as the function of the work. Conducting a risk assessment is one of those types of tasks that takes quite a bit of time, and so that's something that if I'm asked to do that, I often refer back to my former company and say, maybe need a team to do that.
Now, if we take a look at page 10 of your CV, you do list a number of institutions in Australia So sort of 3/4 of the way down, we see Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Melbourne, Victoria, and then there's some others. But starting first with Melbourne, can you explain what work you did for that archdiocese and when it was?
Melbourne in particular, I have not worked closely with. They asked me to do a video, an educational video where they had someone come in and ask certain questions. They came to Austin, where I live, and I answered those questions. And I don't know if they've actually ever used that or not. So that would be one that I have not worked very closely with.
And when was that?
That was maybe a year and a half ago.
And a couple further down, it says Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Sydney.
Yes. I've done work with the Catholic Education Office in Sydney.
Yes, well, you list that separately on the bottom of the next page, so perhaps we can deal with the Catholic Education Office separately, but insofar specifically as the Archdiocese of Sydney is concerned, what work did you do with them and when?
I think that I must have listed that incorrectly, because the work, I've done several different educational programs for the Catholic Education Office, but not the Archdiocese separately from them.
Can you tell us what work you did for the Catholic Education Office?
Sure. I have conducted educational programs on general prevention, awareness of the dynamics of relationship-based abuse, types of people who offend, who sexually abuse in faith-based organizations, and warning signs that we would see in faith-based organizations and how to act on those warning signs in terms of prevention. I've also done a program on pastoral response to people who come forward.
And by done a program, do you mean you came here and ran a program with people from that institution?
I've actually conducted programs for them in two separate ways, and that would actually be other Catholic dioceses from throughout New South Wales were invited to come to or plug into video conference training that I conducted, and then I also came here and conducted programs.
All right, and the programs you came here and conducted?
Yes.
When were those?
I think that the last one I did was 3 years ago.
Is this with teachers or priests or?
I haven't done a program for priests in the Archdiocese of Sydney. Some priests may have come, but it would have been for principals and leadership within Catholic education.
So lay people?
They would be lay people, unless there's a principal that happens to be a religious.
And the Catholic Diocese of Adelaide?
Yes.
What work did you do for them?
Similar types of programs where I usually try to start with the basics of the dynamics of how abuse happens, the experiences that people who are abused describe, and then go into what leadership can do when they learn of warning signs, how they can make it easier for people to come forward.
And was that by video conferencing, or did you come and do programs in Adelaide?
I did programs in Adelaide.
And when was that?
Maybe the first one was in 2010, 2011. And the other, yeah.
And then you've got the Catholic Diocese of Cairns.
Yes.
What did you do with them? Obviously, if it's the same as you did with Adelaide, you can say it's the same and it'll cut it short.
It's the same as I did with Adelaide, but I believe that I conducted more in-depth seminars in Adelaide and have only done basic programs so far in Cairns.
And over the page, about 8 or 10 dot points down, we have the Roman Catholic Diocese of Toowoomba in
Yes.
Queensland.
That's actually another one where I should be specific. That's with the Catholic Education Office in Toowoomba.
And what did you do with them?
I did a seminar, a full-day seminar that they videotaped, where we went from the basics all the way through to what leadership can do to prevent in the future, as well as what ordinary people who are receiving services in the organization, which in this case would be the parents and students, need to know. And they use those videotapes to also conduct educational programs for new staff that are coming in now.
And I missed one on the previous page, Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Brisbane. You've done a couple of educational programs for that archdiocese, have you not?
I have. I went there on this trip, and I also had been there previously 2 years ago.
So if I understand it correctly, the work you've done in Australia has for the most part been educational programs of one form or another, is that right?
That's correct.
And has that really become more the focus of your work since you've been in your own consultancy? Educational programs, that is.
I do more educational programs now because of the time that it takes to do risk assessments and the amount of time being away from home that it takes to do risk assessments, especially if you're just one person. So I do more educational programs, but I also do individual consultancy so that if somebody's dealing with a particular situation, for example, somebody has boundary violations and it's not a criminal behavior, but they're worried about them, that they could get advice and I could review it and walk them through the steps.
And to use your terminology, the standards of care that apply at any particular time are changing, aren't they? I mean, in other words, this is quite a fast-moving area insofar as standards are concerned, is that right?
Yes, I've seen tremendous change since I began the work.
So if one was to talk about current standards, one would be talking what sort of time frame? The last 2, 3 years, 5 years? What would current standards be?
I really put the current standards in a time frame from about 2000 to today. Even though things are changing rapidly, I would call the current era a different time frame from 2000 to today. I think after 2 or 3 more years go by, we're going to be able to separate out 2010 from the others because things are beginning to formulate and become more clear. I'm seeing more consistency, but I'm sure we have a long way to go.
Now, returning to your report itself and paragraph 4 in particular.
Can I just pause for a moment? You speak about current standards or standards. What are you talking about?
When I'm speaking about current standards or standards, I'm really saying, given everything that we know today, what are the reasonable expectations for an organization today? And in a sense, if they're not holding up to those standards that we could expect from everybody, given everything that we know now, what would be falling short of expectations, reasonable expectations by society?
But in relation to what?
In relation to how they prevent abuse, particularly in sexual abuse, how they prevent sexual abuse, how they respond to warning signs, how they respond if somebody actually discloses abuse, how do they fix things afterwards, how do they follow up? So, I mean, the prevention piece of it in itself is where I'm focusing attention now in my educational programs because I feel like we're past the point of just responding properly, that we really should be using what we know to prevent it from happening in the first place. So that's what I mean.
Well, just to develop that a little bit further, insofar then as current standards or current expectations of standards are concerned, let's deal perhaps slightly more narrowly with the question of raising and responding to child sexual abuse allegations or complaints or concerns within an organization. Would one of one of those standards or requirements be what I might describe as child-centered?
That to be child-centered,
Yes.
or I would probably make it a bit more broadly that individual, because a lot of people who come forward, at least in a faith-based organization, come forward later. And so I would hope that even if they weren't a child anymore, that we could have a victim or survivor-centered response.
Yes, I take that point. Thank you. And in other words, would that be that the best interests of the child or adult survivor is foremost in the way in which we respond?
Yes.
Does that mean that the process should be one which is designed to ensure that the child or adult survivor feels able to come forward and comfortable in reporting what's happened?
Absolutely.
Is that a critical thing to an effective response from an institution?
Not in my opinion.
Sorry?
You're saying, is it critical? Oh, you're saying, is it important?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Is it one of the primary, as it were, factors that must...
Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching, and bye for now.